So here we are, everybody, part 2 of my 1/48 scale Lincoln build, and this is what it looks like at the beginning of part 2. I haven't done anything to it yet on part 2. This is the fresh start, and you'll get to watch me take it from this to a finished model. Now the first thing I'm going to have to do with this is get the H2S radar installed. I realized after the fact that that was supposed to be fitted on the Canadian built Lincoln, so I'm going to have to get that glued on, cleaned up, and all that ready to go for paint, and then I can start painting. As I'm working on the Hurricane, which is peeking out right here, it's going to have the same basic color scheme as this, so as I'm painting the Hurricane, which is my focus, I'll be painting this one as well and moving along. Now it's going to be, like I said, the green and brown over black, very similar to that Hurricane model. And for the black, I'm going to do what I normally do, and that's just use Panzer dark gray instead of black. Scale black doesn't look right. If you actually painted it flat black, it's just not going to look right. So a dark gray at scale looks correct for black. And then it also differentiates between, you know, the dark gray of the belly versus black of propellers. And those two colors are very different in real life. So that's my plan for this. And then a lot of little things I got to worry about. I've done, so the roundels, the national insignias are going to be the Tamiya decals. And then for the code, because this is being completed as the only Canadian built Lincoln FM300, I needed the FM300 for the rear fuselage. So I made some masks on my Cricut. And again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this caught in the light properly, but I've created 2 sets, and then I'll paint some white. I'll mix up some custom color, the red, the dull red color. I'll make up some custom paint. I'll paint that, I'll hit the masks, and then I can complete the rest of the paint. And then when I peel those off, you'll have FM300 on the fuselage, and then you'll have all the roundels. And yeah, in terms of weather, I still got to glue the exhausts on. I haven't done that yet. I'll do that after it's all painted, paint those up properly, glue them on, and then I'll have just the thinnest, lightest exhaust stains, just enough to look like it was used, but not combat. I'm not going to black wash it at all. It's pretty much going to be original paint kind of thing, just a clean, factory clean, because that's how it was. It only flew a few times and then was broken up at the factory and never went anywhere else. So that's the plan for that. So we'll see how much more of it. Like I said, there's still a lot of little things I got to do. The tail gun's a big one. The upper gun's got to be assembled. Like I said, props, exhausts, the final paint, all the little, like, I haven't glued on any of the control surface counterweights or anything on all the antennas. All that's got to be done. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a lot of work, but it's gonna look really good when it's done. So stick around. We'll see the end of this. And as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. So as you can see, I get right into the painting stages on this. I get that red area painted. I get the aircraft code masked off using those pre-cut Cricut masks I made. And then I go ahead and start painting it up. I get the brown painted, and then using the standard kind of worm putty technique that I use, I go ahead and mask all that brown off and get the green painted. You'll see I'm actually using my phone to get a decent camo layout for the Lincoln, because it's a base Lancaster kit and I used the aftermarket Lincoln conversion. There's no real like camo layout, so I'm using this. I found a diagram online from another model that showed a pretty accurate camo pattern layout. So I'm using that to roughly lay that out, and you'll see it doesn't take long for me to get through, get all of that camo painted up, and then I'll mask all of that off, and I go ahead and paint the lower half of the aircraft black. It's actually the Panzer dark gray that I use for my standard kind of black night fighter aircraft, that slightly off from black. Black looks too dark. This is just a really dark gray. Really makes it look accurate when you get that all together. And you'll see there's a few things I forget. I actually forget to put the H2S antenna on, and a little bit of cleanup along the center fuselage that I got to get done before I finish painting. But once I get it done, it looks really good. You'll see here once I get all of those other things, the black paint and all the little details ready to go, I start doing the gloss coat in preparation for decals. It's just Future Floor Wax, same thing I use for all of my gloss coating on all my models. Just brush it on, it more or less self levels, and it's a perfect surface for decaling. So the one thing you have to be careful of, which I have noted in other videos, is if you apply Future to an area that's adjacent to where you've already applied Future. Basically, if you overlap new Future onto old Future, it can turn milky and it will usually dry clear. If you do have any issues in an area that it stays milky, just add a bit of more Future and it kind of resoftens it up and it'll dry clear again. So don't freak out if you notice any of that milkiness appearing where you have new Future applied over previously applied Future. After I get the gloss coat done, I get right into decals. Again, aftermarket kit did not come with any decals. So for everything that's on this kit, I am using the standard Tamiya Lancaster decals that came with the kit. Because I'm not doing any type of squadron codes or anything else like that, didn't matter that I'm using the Tamiya decals. They worked perfectly for what I needed. I just assumed all of the Lancaster stencils would be the same on the Lincoln. Might be right, might be wrong. Either way, they look good. And then the only real individualized markings are that aircraft code FM300 that I painted that you saw me mask at the beginning. And here I've got the decals finished. I'm going to start working on the tail turret. Get that starting to go. I got to paint it black. You'll notice earlier I missed painting the vertical tails, so I did that along with the propeller hubs to get those painted black so I could get the decals on them. And I've realized that I also forgot to get the turrets assembled so I could paint it black at the same time. So kind of getting that done here as I move along with the construction. So now that I've got all of the decals in place, I'm going to go ahead and give it another coat of Future. And this is kind of twofold. One, it's going to protect these decals from the next stage. Things like weathering and, you know, black wash, all that kind of stuff. It's going to protect all of these decals and limit the chance of them potentially being lifted by either masking or, like I said, wiping off that black wash. You don't want to take a chance. So part of the reason I seal this again is to protect the decals. The second is, I might have mentioned this earlier while I was decaling, the decals sometimes leave a little bit of a lip around the carrier film, and this Future will just help kind of hide the worst of that. And any kind of little weird bumps and stuff on the decals, this tends to hide it, minimize the visibility of them, and blend it all together. And you want to give it lots of overlap. You know, don't just go just to the edge. Take it out an inch or two around all the sides, and that'll just ensure that the Future kind of bonds with the lower layer of Future, and again limits the chances of everything lifting later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and get all of this sealed, and then give it a solid 24 hours. You don't want this stuff to be tacky at all. You want it to be completely dry before you do the next layer, especially if you're going to be doing a water-based wash, which is what I tend to do. I use tempera paint. So if this is, you know, if the Future hasn't fully cured and you try to do a water-based wash, there's a very good chance you're going to disrupt that layer of Future and potentially damage the underlying decals. So give it about 24 hours, make sure it's nice and cured, and then you can go ahead and start your next layer of washes. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to jump back to a time lapse, and we can get all of this sealed. And here I start getting the assembly of the propellers together. You saw me paint those propeller hubs earlier in the build, and then I just finished, you'll see, getting the yellow tips painted on the blades. Now I've got to go through and glue the blades onto the hubs. Being a resin set, the fit isn't very positive. It isn't like a pin in a hole with a specifically oriented, like a D shape or anything like that, or a plus shape to orient the props in a very specific place. So I'm kind of going through and just doing it by eye. I'm using the grid pattern on my cutting board to ensure the props are lined up more or less on a 90-degree angle to each other. And then I'm just getting the angle of the prop, the blade orientation, as close as I can by eye. And here you'll see I'm just doing some final touch-ups on that undercolor. Once you get the gloss coat on and everything, you start to notice there's some variations in the paint where you didn't get perfect coverage, and there's some spots here around the engine cowlings and some of the little scoops and stuff where I had some underspray and I missed some color, some areas. So I'm just going with the brush, touching all that up. Then you'll see me start to install the landing gear and whatnot, get that ready to finally get it up on its wheels. And it's really starting to come together and look like a finished product at this point. So we are at a pretty momentous point in the build of this kit, and I am basically ready to start pulling the maskings off. This is kind of one of those moments when the kit really starts to come together, I find. You've always got that moment when you do the assembly of the fuselage. You've got the moment when you kind of get paint and decals done. But when you pull the masking, that's when you really start to see all that work you put into it come pay off. Because until you get those maskings off and you can see interior details and canopies and windows, and planes start to look like the planes that they are supposed to look like. And it's exciting. So we'll get this masking pulled off. Unfortunately, there's a lot of it on the Lancaster. It's got this heavily framed greenhouse canopy, so there's quite a bit of work I got ahead of me. So I'm not going to talk through the whole thing here. I'll jump into a time lapse here, excuse me, in a minute. We'll get all these maskings pulled. I've got the canopy to do, I've got the two side windows to do, and I've got this forward greenhouse. Again, a lot of heavily framed window areas, but we'll get all this pulled off, and then we're really into the home stretch. I think the next thing I'll do is glue the tail wheel and the main wheels. The landing gear are already glued in place, but the wheels have to be glued on. That gets it sitting kind of in its final orientation, and it makes it a lot easier to put it down kind of on the shelf and stuff to get it stored. And then I just got to work on fiddly bits. I don't even know what I have left other than tails and props and turrets and exhausts. I kind of have to just look at some references and check the instructions for the Lancaster and actually really see what I have left. I've got some landing lights to do, and I've got the position lights to paint. Propellers are ready to be installed. Tails are ready to be installed. The turrets need a bit of work still. I've still got to do a lot of detailing and painting of the turrets, the top and the tail. Specifically, the tail has quite a bit of work left on it. But luckily, this is being a more or less a clean factory finish plane. There isn't quite as much work to be put into this one as there is some of the other ones. So anyways, I think that's about it. I'm going to jump into a time lapse. We'll get the rest of this masking pulled and probably get the wheels glued on. And then from there, it'll just be just fiddly bits. So yeah, let's get at it. So here I'm just doing the final masking on the tail turret, get that ready for paint. You'll also see I brush paint the upper turret. I really should have masked and painted that, but again, I wasn't thinking that far ahead when I did the painting, and I ended up getting kind of behind the ball on that. So I just did it by hand. You'll also see a little bit down here, I start working on the gear doors. They still have to be painted up and everything and get installed. A lot of little kind of fiddly bits that I forgot about earlier on in the process. And then right at the very end here in a couple of minutes, you'll see I wrap it all up by gluing on the gun barrels, the landing lights, the exhaust stacks, as well as the radar antennas on the ILS antennas basically on the side of the nose. And then that will wrap up this kit. So here it is. We have this Lincoln finished. It turned out really, really good. A few minor things I would change, you know, doing it again, but not a lot. I'm very happy with how this turned out, considering I started this, about 15 odd years ago, and I kind of jumped back into it. I couldn't ask for a nicer looking model. It looks really, really good sitting on the shelf with my other Lancasters. It's just a really clean looking, nice looking build. I can't say enough of it. I'm really happy with it. The Paragon conversion went together really nice. You know, it would have been better if I was using a more modern tooling. This is an older tooling. I think it's from the 1970s initially, this Lancaster. So it suffers from some issues of being an older tooling. But no, I mean, I can't complain. This thing looks great. I love it. Yeah. I'm going to wrap it up. I'll put up some pictures of the model itself in kind of that wrap-up photo shoot I usually do. Not entirely sure how well this is going to work. I usually set up that blue chute area here, and as you can see, this model is much bigger than the area I have, so I'm going to have to figure out how to properly do some good pictures. I might have to set something up on the floor or something, but we'll see. Either way, we'll wrap it up here. We'll take a quick look at some pictures of this thing finished, and as always, we'll see you next time for the next time lapse.